Springboks gave a 14-point lead in Auckland, and it's going to be hard to come back against any All Black team if you give them a 14-point lead on their hallowed ground. With me today again is Gavin Rich and Nick Mallett. Guys, welcome. Nick, start with you. Just your thoughts on the test. That 14-point the lead was deadly at the end of the day.
Yeah. Morning to both of you. I think overall, it's just a sense of disappointment at a missed opportunity. I think this is a good team and a really good coaching squad that put everything into this game. And to start out the match with two individual errors from your most experienced players virtually was really disappointing. It's hard to say what happened to Willie there because it was the most incomprehensible thing to. I think he slipped actually. I think the guy took a very good cross kick. He dived and caught the ball. And I don't know whether Willie was watching the ball or watching the attacker, but as he got to him, he sort of slipped and fell over him. And you know, obviously you can't fall on a player on the ground, but the field was slippery, so but it was just deadly, you know, because once he was on the ground, the guy just got up and ran over to score. So, you know, he had to control his speed. He had to slow down. He had to ensure that he tackled the guy if he wasn't going to get the ball. That was the first one. The second one was a very clever move off the back of a line out. It really was. They dummied a jump at the back, and we contested at the back. So our last guy was lifting our jump in the line out. We had one guy roaming the hooker. And, you know, they played a very nice sort of, a guy on the outside and then back and to Wellington, who just tore through and scored. It was beautifully done. Timing was excellent. But you're 100% right, Brendan. You know, you're 14 points down at Eden Park, most difficult place to beat the All Blacks, and it's a hell of a fight back. I thought we did. We knuckled down the next 60 minutes. I thought we were with them. Stupid mistakes allowed them back into the game. From the kickoff, that obstruction was really disappointing. You know, obviously the yellow card to Kwacha was also disappointing, allowing them to get a foothold in our 22 and then score their try. But to fight back with Reinach and Marx's try and then right at the end to be on their line, you know, obviously we can talk about the referee. With decisions there as well at the end, which didn't work for us. But that generally does happen when you play away from home. So but all is not lost. I did think we'd win one of the two, and I was out of two, but that perhaps was just a little bit overconfidence on our behalf.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Nick said there. You know, talking about that, you said that we would win one of the two. I've always sort of felt that like there was too much emphasis put on this Eden Park test. There was like it was almost like this was the only game actually that was going to be played. But going to Wellington and let's be honest, which result do you always remember the longest? Do you remember the most recent one? So if the Boks win Saturday, they will go home. They will go home feeling confident, and they'll go home feeling happy. But I think it's very important for the Boks to win on Saturday because what I'm starting to pick up I mean, from watching the games and also just hearing talk around the camp is that there seems to have been a little bit of a sort of loss of self-belief to me. I mean, there have been many occasions in the last couple of years where you watch a Bok team and they're in a situation like they were on Saturday and you sort of think, well, they'll still dig themselves out of it. But to me, it was almost like we were stepping back in time. We were going back to a time where we conspired against ourselves. We kept on making mistakes every time we try to get back in the, and I kept on thinking we're back in the Heineke Meyer era, or we're back maybe more probably in the Alistair Coetzee era, or even before that. You know, that we suddenly in New Zealand. And there's another thing. Sorry, it's just thinking on the hoof here. There's another thing that we never really mentioned in the build-up, or certainly myself and you did, Brendan, was that what we might be forgetting is that the Boks, because they no longer play Super Rugby, not as familiar with New Zealand as they used to be. And the guys used to go to Eden Park and yes, they'd never won there in a Springbok jersey, but a lot of franchise teams used to win at Eden Park back in the day. So it's a whole new thing now. I mean, because we never made the semi-final, I mean, we never made it to Auckland in 2011. Okay, we did have a subsequent game there in 2013. I was forgetting the Bismarck test. So we've only played there once in the last 12 years. And recently, because of COVID, we've only been to New Zealand once before now, and that was when we were at Mount Smart 2 years ago, which was a very similar game to this. New Zealand hit us early. Remember, we looked shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Even more so in that game. We looked shell-shocked in that game. And it's almost like I sort of was sitting there on Saturday and I was sort of thinking, well, they need 20 minutes to sort of get used to playing in New Zealand again. The previous game that we'd played in New Zealand was in the build-up to the 2019 World Cup, was that draw in Wellington, which is a long time ago now, 6 years. So we've actually played twice in the last 6 years. And before that, we used to play all the time. We had players in our team that went there, that played 3 games a year in New Zealand sometime, and plus the test match would be 4 times. So there was a lot of familiarity then. I think now that's why I've always been confident that we'll win this weekend again in Wellington, because we would have found our feet. We would be back in New Zealand. What is just important is, and we're going to know quite soon, because then there just mustn't be any panic. I'm just a bit concerned that we're not winning those clutch moments. We're not winning those big moments anymore. And to me, and this obviously was a perception that started in Cape Town, to me that maybe we kept on talking about Ellis Park as a nightmare. Maybe it was more of a nightmare to the BOKS than we think.
There's no question. You spoke about a bit of loss of belief. I can't imagine what must have gone through those twice World Cup winners playing in the BOKS side in that first test against Australia when they scored 38 unanswered points. You know, it's just something that's never happened to those players in the last 5-6 years under Rusty. So it was almost like that first 30 minutes against England. Remember when we played England at Ellis Park and we came back and won it 21 points up in no time at all. And everyone was thinking, what the hell's going on here? Aren't we supposed to be a decent rugby team? And it was just shell-shocked, the team. And to come back from that, it wasn't a good enough performance in Cape Town to re-establish that belief. And then to go to Eden Park, which is go to New Zealand anytime is very tough. And if we ever beat them, we usually beat them by only a score, not much more than that. Usually about, if we get to 7 points ahead, that's a good result in New Zealand. So you can't afford any errors. You can't afford any mistakes. And in this game, there were just so many clutch moments. The ball off the top to Grant Williams that he knocked on, he just looked up. There was an obstruction, going in 2 players just in front of the ball in their 22 when we had some real momentum. We lost a couple of lineouts at key situations where I think we were already thinking about what attacking move we were going to do. So what we're doing at the moment is the back line are wanting a certain lineout in order to place certain loose forwards in the back line to form an attacking strategy. And so they're dictating the lineouts. And when I was chatting to Victor Matfield, which was really interesting, he's fascinated. He's just brilliant on lineouts. He said the most important thing when you're struggling in lineouts is to go to a full lineout, because you have 3 options all the time, and they usually only have 2 pods defending against you. So if you have a good caller, you're always going to be throwing on on an area that isn't protected by their two blocks of jumpers. And I looked at a lot of the times, we were trying to do a 5-man line out or a 4-man line out with a guy out. And I knew in the midfield that we were going to do, and then subsequent moves after that, which was more, playing towards our attack. But anyway, that is the evolution that we get to. We're wanting to compete. We're not, start, 14, not miles off that last 60, wasn't that? And if it'll be remiss not to go against the inconsistencies of the refereeing decisions. It was we played their scrum off when the ball was out, and he penalised us and yellow carded one of our players. But they played our scrum off when the ball was out, and he just said the ball's out. You can play the scrum off if the ball's out. So they're 2 very similar situations. If the ball's out, you can play the scrum off. So we shouldn't have been penalised. And there were situations at the scrum time when we were clearly going forward on Ox's side, and the ball collapsed, the scrum collapsed, and he said play away from the back of the scrum for the All Blacks, which is you can't get scrum dominance if their guy collapses. So you have to stay up in the scrum, and so we weren't getting full credit for our dominance in the scrum. So it was tricky. And we were hammering away on their line right at the end of the game. So as I say, we're not miles away. I just don't, I agree with you, Gav. I don't think there needs to be a lot of panic here. We need to just knuckle down and start perhaps a little bit more confidently, fewer mistakes and individual mistakes, obviously, not collective mistakes. But if we can do that in Wellington, I think we've got a very good chance.
Well, you used the word evolution, which I was pleased about. You used the word, sorry, Brent, just the word evolution, because, I always hear around this debate that, yes, there's suddenly the attack coach is a lot more important in the whole setup. So that may impact other areas of the game. But when you say evolution, would you agree that it's a necessary evolution, that we do need to go through, and I've used this expression before, growing pains, and that,
Absolutely.
it is part of the process. We couldn't keep our game. I mean, okay, if we were 14-0, if we were 14-0 down before, then it was game over.
Exactly.
At least now we can fight back. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. No, absolutely. And understand too, laws have been the laws have been not changed completely, but adapted a little bit to mitigate against our strengths. I mean, perhaps it is a World Rugby a decision to tell the referees we don't want reset scrums and penalties at scrums. So if the ball's at the back at number 8, don't worry about a collapsed scrum. And if they've said that, then that's taking away a lot of our strength, which is the powerful front row and the bomb squad coming on and dominating. The maul, you can sort of swim through a maul, you can stay where you were. You suddenly find players in all sorts of strange positions with before. So the mauls aren't becoming as effective, and we were very good at that. And just in terms of our physicality, if we are only going to be playing one pass rugby, it's very easy to defend against us. I mean, even New Zealand, France, England, anyone will be able to front up against us. So we have to have the ball out the back. We have to have the variety, the flat cross kick, the chip over the top. You have to have the Tony Brown influences to be able to create doubt in the defender's mind as to what we're going to do. And it's just a question of us getting those calls right, getting the decisions, when to put the chip over, when to put the cross kick in, when to play out the back. If we get those decisions right, then we're going to be a very, very effective team.
Nick, I was going to come in and just say that, I mean, what you said also about the referee and that, and before the time, you said also how the doubt can creep into a team like that. What is interesting to me is I think for once, once in the last couple of games, Rassie got that bomb squad particularly right. The backline players in particular were exceptionally good in that second half. And I think we probably came out, even though we lost the game, I think the way we finished that game, and even though the ref coached them in the rucks, there was one terrible ruck where the guy was lying over the ball. I think we've come out with a lot more confidence there, and that might be just good enough maybe to erase that Ellis Park thing, because I still think there were a lot of nightmares of that one going into this game as well.
No, Brendan, your point about it wasn't the bomb squad, the replacements that came on, because I actually thought the one error we made was not getting low on the field early enough. I think if you got him on at half-time, we could see that Ox was dominating on his side, but unfortunately Thomas wasn't getting dominance on the tight head side. And what was happening was the scrum was turning to the left. It was going ahead on the left-hand side, and it looked like Ox was scrumming around, which he wasn't. He was just getting on top of his guy. So we weren't going forward on the tight head side. And as soon as we got Wilco Low on, geez, that one scrum was dead. And if we can get, there's nothing a ref can do. He can't say play away at the back if you're getting the dominance like that. I mean, Kwagga was able to pick the ball up and run 10 yards before an All Black even touched him. We'd gone forward so fast in that scrum. So that was the one error. I thought we could have got our tight head on quicker. And had we done so, perhaps we would have imposed ourselves a bit more on the game in that aspect, in the scrummaging aspect. But otherwise, you're 100%. I thought Reinach did really well. I thought Sasha added a snap and a crackle. I thought also that Hooker is such a confident young man. He's going to be very, very good for us. But even Boan Fenta, I mean, the guys who were inexperienced, they all had a big impact. Loert, Boan, and Henrik Wessels, they're good players. They're really good players. So that made a big difference when they came on. And I think there was a better blend of attack. Funny enough, it just looked like Grant had got a bit flustered. They were having a go at him around the rucks. As you said, the ref was allowing a bit of a mess at the breakdown. and he was under a bit of pressure from the lineouts, the tap ball in the lineouts. And I just thought that knock on probably shook him a little bit from the lineout when he knocked off the ball off the top. So I thought when Reina came on, he did provide a lot of clarity and a lot of calmness there that made a difference.
Brendan, I thought Russie could maybe have even brought Sasha on a little bit earlier once we were chasing the game. I mean, that's a benefit of hindsight, which obviously is always a perfect science. Just because I thought Sasha was really good when he came on, and he's the guy there to sort of, when you're chasing a game, I think he's almost like the perfect guy to have on the field, because then suddenly you can give him his full bundle of tricks, and he can be the sort of the Glenn Maxwell, and if you're talking cricket, bring out your reverse sweeps early and do all that. And I thought, I mean, look, we're going to have the Springbok team announced quite soon, but I do think, and again, he came on. Where would you play him? But I think he is deserving of quite a lot of minutes in the BOKS jersey. And if Russie backed him at fly half last year at Ellis Park in that huge test, which was the equivalent of the Eden Park test last year in South Africa, he backed him then there's probably no reason why he shouldn't back him going forward. Of course, we're going to get overtaken by the Springbok team announcement, but I just felt that maybe if Sasha had been on just a little bit earlier, we might even have got more out of that game.
Yeah. What do you think about Willie, and what do you think about Marks? Both of them, I think, are well below their normal playing ability at the moment. I'm not sure what's happening there. Willie I think he was shaken by that mistake he made. But Marks has been consistently below par in terms of his key skills throwing in, and getting the throw in right. So I think he's down to 70% or something like that of his line-out throwing. And he's such a good player, I'm just not sure what's going on there. So is he carrying an injury?
Yeah, I did hear before the Cape Town test that he was carrying an injury, and that if it wasn't such an important game, he might have. That was what I heard from around the camp. So I think he might still be carrying it. When it comes to Willie, myself and Brendan chatted on Saturday, and we had slightly different views, because he did recover, and Brendan pointed out that he did do some good things later in the game. I just sort of feel that it's time that the BOKS did, given that we've got Fussy and we've got Damien Wellington, who's an amazing rugby player. If you're chasing a game and you've got you can use it. Well, but if you've got Damien and you've got Sasha on the same field, you've got so much. To me, it's I hate saying this, because it's not something that, to me, it almost. I sometimes watch Willie and I almost sort of think that he doesn't actually want to be there. It's like, I don't know, it's a difficult thing to explain, but he almost looks a little bit like a deer in the headlights sometimes, or maybe he's always been like that. I don't know. But if I was Willie, and you're at this stage of your career, you're going to New Zealand, I might sort of think to myself, well, jeepers, I'll go there and I'll help the guys out. I don't really want to be starting the test in Eden Park. I've won 2 World Cups already. Who needs that pressure? And sometimes when I watch them, I sort of feel like that. I mean, I know that's an unfair thing to say, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying he's scared. That's not what I'm saying, because no rugby player who goes onto the field. No. But to me, he just looks a little bit like, he's a little bit more gun shy than he used to be. Towards the end of his cricket career, I mean, there were people who disputed this. Towards the end of his cricket career, I felt that Jacques Kallis wasn't picking up the bouncer anymore. He didn't quite. So when he eventually retired from cricket, remember, suddenly it was an up thing. I remember thinking that I'm not surprised at that, because you could sort of feel that he just wasn't quite sure that there were weaknesses going into.
You've been there. You've done it all.
So do you think that it's possible with Willie? I don't know.
I think his job has been to bring through those two players you mentioned, Fussy and now suddenly he's back in the number one spot, and we were asking him for his experience and for the best he can give, and he's basically, I think not checked out, but he's been sort of coaching, I think, a bit of that, and really been contributing from the side in terms of giving those guys really good strategic, how the positional play that they have to have, and when they should counterattack, how they should be talking to their wingers in order to, make sure that the 3 guys at the back remain connected on defence. So he was giving all that information, and even with the Bulls, he was doing similar things, and then he had to move to fly half. So it is an interesting thing, but I think possibly with him, it is time now to move on to one of the other two and make sure that they are up and running by 2027 and give them as much time as possible.
And just on the hooker, we were talking about Malcolm, because I also found myself saying this late in the evening. I actually stayed in Durban at the weekend. I was at Saracens were in town, and so I was speaking to some of the Sharks coaches and that. And I have a feeling that Malcolm's best day. Okay, there was that exception at Nelspruit where he won the game. I think it was his 100th game he started, and he won 50th or 100th game, and he started and he sort of won the game for us. And then we all attacked Jacques Nienaber the following week, because he had Malcolm playing off the bench. But what we forget is that Joseph Dweber was the starting hooker that day, and not Bongi. And I think that Bongi's days might be done. But I'm not entirely sure that Malcolm's role isn't still, at some stage, if we get a hooker that we can back to sort of start the game, that it would be, because then we've got a proper box squad. When Malcolm comes onto the field to bring impact in the second half, I think that if you look back and you look at his most effective games for the Boks, often it is in that role.
Yeah. I mean, Bongi. The fact that we haven't found a replacement for Bongi yet has been a real issue. Jan Hendrik playing loose head and then playing, trying to be one of these rotating players. I think we need a backup. We need two specialist hookers of top quality, two specialist tight heads of top quality, and the same at loose head. Then we can still have that powerful effect when the bomb squad, when the front row come on and the extra lock comes on. So it probably, I think it could be Wessels. It could be him. They use Pobela a little bit, and I'm not sure who else has played. You've got on this tour, they've got who's the guy who plays for Scarlets? They've got him there. Yeah, that's right. So Marcus, what's his name? Marius or Marcus? Sorry,
Marius. Van der
Manus van der Merwe.
Sorry, you're into blank thing.
Yeah.
Can you guys still see me? Because I've
yes.
Yeah,
we can see you.
I've got a blank head.
Yeah, I was going to say, also, I heard that Jan Hendrik was going to play in Cape Town, possibly going to start. That was the original plan before they lost in Joburg. And then obviously he had the clash of heads with Eben, so he had got concussed, so he was out there. So that might have been the plan, to bring him through a bit more there. The other thing as well, I think, sometimes you spoke a bit earlier about it, Nick, about how the guys were so shell-shocked in Joburg. I think part of it is that, I mean, if you look on Saturday, the All Blacks caught us out at the breakdown. They flooded the breakdown. Now, of course, a good side would probably see that the opportunity, more guys in the breakdown, there must be space somewhere else that you can exploit, obviously. Yeah. But the fact that Grant got rattled there as well, we were struggling to handle that as well. So the Russia's not going to throw away Grant in one game, because he is probably their number one scrum half. But I could probably see somebody like Faf coming into that team might be just tactically a bit better in the second test. Or
getting a bit. It is. You've hit the nail on the head. It is the quality of ball you're getting. Gives you that opportunity to, as a scrum half, to take better decisions. I mean, if you're rushed there and under pressure and you're trying to scrabble the ball out with your hands, and there's someone, there's a guy looming over you waiting for you to grab your jersey. You're not as calm with your box kicks and with your decisions as you normally are. So you're going back to the Italy game. Italy put us under pressure when they flooded the breakdown. We complained that the ref didn't referee it properly. I thought Australia were very good at the breakdown against us in Joburg, and also in Cape Town, and again, it's happened here. So a lot of sides are going hard at the breakdown against us. They're putting in 2 or 3 players, because they'd rather have slow ball, get us to have slow ball off that breakdown. Even if they lose it, they'd rather that ball is as slow as possible. They make a mess of that breakdown, so that we don't get that rhythm and that momentum that makes us such a very, very difficult team to stop. In those first 20 minutes in that Australian game, they didn't slow our ball down, and when they don't slow our ball down and we're getting ball on the front foot, then we're very, very hard to stop. So I think that's one of the tactics teams are using against us: heavy contesting and counter-racking at the breakdown. To the extent that even the last breakdown of the game, they counteract us and took the ball. Admittedly, we were playing behind the advantage line a lot, but that is what teams are going to do against us, to slow our ball down.
Yeah, I was going to say that they did that extremely well, but it also worried me is the way how we've been caught out. I mean, we tried that line-out move again on Saturday in the middle of the field again. It didn't work. It just seems like the Boks have been, maybe it's because they've just, there's that hangover of Ellis Park, but it just seems that the All Blacks came with a couple of plans, which we expected them to do to counter our strengths. And we didn't adapt very well. And I think that's also a bit of a worry to me. And Gavin and I spoke about it on Saturday. It just seems this team's taking a bit longer to adapt. And maybe that's because they're not getting set piece dominance and they're not getting their ball like they're normally doing. But it is a frustration. So,
well, going back to far fewer scrum penalties, which used to give us, we used to get 6 a game, which used to give us entries and exits for free. And then we were right up at 90% in our lineout, in our lineouts, and we'd contest well and win a couple of the opposition. So you're 100% right. Our set pieces are not as clinical as they used to be. And teams, there's no question they've worked out our rush defense. The cross kick to Nawara, I think his name is, the guy on the wing who scored, was really well done as well. It wasn't our first receiver off the line; it was second. I think they played a forward. Adi Severe played the scrum off, who then played behind the back of a centre coming short, played Barrett. And when you have 2 passes, it brings up the winger that much closer, because we coming in to close down the wide space, and that left Billy completely isolated on his own. If they kick from the first receiver, our wing can still stay relatively wide and he doesn't have to come in quickly. But when it's off second receiver, it's very, very hard for that winger to stay out wide for the cross kick. He's got to come in and close down. So teams are working out how we defend, and they're working out what moves to do to exploit space. And that's what we've got to do. I mean, that's why Tony Brown is such a good coach. Once Tony Brown can actually analyze opposition well enough to say, okay, if we win our first phase ball, on our terms, then these are the areas we need to attack, because this is the way this team defends, and this is the space we can find. But that takes time, and it does take time. And as you say, we are taking a bit of time. It's not in our DNA, quite frankly. For quite a long time, we've been playing direct rugby. Right from when Rassie first took the team, it was route one and box kicks and great defense and massive effort at scrum time and first phase. And teams weren't used to this and our defensive system with Jacques and Nina, but they hadn't seen it before. Now teams are evolving and they're getting better, and you just have to evolve with it. We've got to get better ourselves.
The one thing we mustn't forget as well is that we sort of look back and we say, well, last year New Zealand came to South Africa and we won twice. We were unlucky maybe not to beat Ireland, but if you look back and even we go back to the World Cup, it's not like we've been running over everybody. And that New Zealand series last year, we were very concerned for most. We sat next to each other in that Ellis Park game last year, Brennan, and there was a time you thought the game was gone. I didn't think so, because I believed in that mental strength that I mentioned earlier on. And maybe that's the sort of quantum difference between now and then. Because I remember sitting there and thinking the Boks will come back, even though they were 10 points behind with 12 minutes to go. It was just something about that Boks team, because they were the masters not this weekend.
No, this weekend, Gavin and I were talking on WhatsApp during the game, and I, at some point, when we before we got that last try, I said we're going to get a late try against us. We're going to probably lose 27-10 or something like that, because that's normally, I've seen this movie before. That's happened in the past in all Black games. And it wouldn't be a fair reflection of the rest of the game. But and Gav said, no, it's going to be a draw. So we tend to be very different.
I had a funny thing. I wasn't brave enough to predict that in my Supersport.com preview, but for some reason I always just had a feeling it was going to be a draw. I was at a draw in that stadium in 1994, maybe it was, and I remember the other All Black result that wasn't perfect there was against the Lions in 2017 when they drew. I just always had a feeling that it was going to be one of those games where it was just like so near yet so far, because the All Blacks would have then defended their fortress, but it was a draw. But it would have been like one of those sort of like weird, like anticlimactic things. And I just had that feeling, and I still had that feeling until quite late in the game. In fact, until Adi Severe basically sort of ended it for us. But just saying, like, we're talking about evolution now, and Brendan, you and I chatted after the Cape Town test against them last year. I remember I think the headline of our podcast thing was growing pains or something like that. I just feel that we will continue to go through sort of those growing pains. And it wasn't. I mean, one of the big sources for hope I think for South Africans in this last game is that, you know, we keep saying that they came back well and everything, and we sort of like going back into the old era in a way of like sort of celebrating a close defeat. But you know, the reality is that we probably couldn't have got more wrong than we got at
Yeah.
in a sense against ourselves. We went there, we played Santa Claus to the All Blacks. Like we were sort of like, you guys must need some self-respect back. Yeah, you can. We'll give you a chance. I can't see them doing that again. I can't see them doing that again in Wellington, and that's why I'm so confident about Wellington. Is just because, in some ways, like the last 3 quarters of that game in Eden Park was more, and this is going to sound bizarre, is more encouraging to me than a lot of the game in Cape Town possibly last year, where I thought the All Blacks the Boks weren't quite as good as they could have been. Yeah. It sort of went back to my sort of conviction before last year's series that the Boks might win by a big score. So, and Saturday I sort of started thinking, well, maybe that could happen again in the future. I mean, we're well beaten. I mean, we were beaten fairly fair and square. I mean, I agree with the misgivings about the referee and that, but we couldn't have played worse than we did in the sense of conspiring against ourselves. And yet we still were in it at the end. Yeah.
It'd be nice to see what team he picks. I think that's going to be it's going to be pretty critical. And there's no question we're coming to that time where we need a win now. We need a win because 3 losses out of 4. Then question marks about players, about age, about experience or youth over experience are all going to come through. So if we get a decent, well, not even a decent, just a 1-point win, if we get a win on Saturday at Wellington, it'll put us back on the road again. And I think that's, I did hope that Argentina would beat Australia once, and I'm hoping that we're going to beat New Zealand once. And I think this competition's still got a long way to go. I hope so, because I think there are 4 very good teams and 4 teams developing differently at different stages in their careers. And ours is trying to hang on to greatness. All Blacks are getting back to greatness, and the Australians from nowhere, getting respect, and Argentina just making sure that everyone understands that they're one of the top 4 teams in the world. They're a really good side. So there's so much still to come in this competition, and this next Saturday is wide open.
Nick, don't you think that there's a time that we might be heading towards? Sorry, we might be heading towards like a wider sort of decision that might be made at some stage. And this is going to sound very left field, but you can probably relate to this after you took your team to win a Grand Slam before a World Cup year in 1998, and in the end, you probably sort of look back with regret that you didn't do what the All Blacks did several years later by almost like sending a second string team for some games and a first string team,
exactly,
resting some of the players. And I just sort of felt like, I think a lot of us we're critical of the French when they sent an understrength team to New Zealand. But like when you look at it, maybe it's sort of unavoidable if you're going to be, and there is some merit. I mean, Jake did it. Jake White did it in 2006. He sent a second string. I know he got into trouble when he was brought home, but I mean, South African rugby was. I mean, let's not go into how South African rugby was right in those days. But Jake did it in 2006. He hardly had any of his World Cup winners play against England at the end of 2006 that were there in 2006 in the World Cup. And I just sort of feel that maybe we are getting to a point now where our top players aren't getting an off season. As I say, I've just been in Durban last week. I mean, John Plumtree never sees the Sears and those guys for a proper off season. So when do they ever get an off season?
Exactly.
At some stage, wouldn't it be an idea to offer them a window and say, listen, you guys are having a couple of months off now. You actually are having an off season or pre-season. You can come back to the Sharks in January or whatever. I know it's difficult because the Sharks own them a lot, but do you think we might be heading towards that point?
We have to. No, we absolutely have to. South Africa is probably in the one country in the position where we play all year round, because we got the Northern Hemisphere, we're in our franchise rugby, and we're still in the Southern Hemisphere in a national with the rugby championship. Top players are playing. If they had to play every game that they've signed up for, they would play every single month. And I know that South African rugby's got a 6-week window they have to take, but I'm much more in favour of what you've just said, which is 2 months. Take 2 months off, finish the rugby championship, and when will that be? In September, so October, November, but then you've got to go on the Northern Hemisphere tour, and then you've got to say to yourself, what sort of team would you take then if you're giving everyone, resting everyone? So is it then that you rest them, or do you rest them when they come back after that until mid-February maybe? But they have to have, our players, our top players have to have a 2-month window to rest, and that's what John Dobson's done with the Stormers URC players. He said it's just not possible to compete in the Currie Cup and in URC and in the European Cup with the same group of players. Even if you've got 25 and you rotate them, you get an injury every game. Now it's such as the toughness of the sport that you need a big squad and you need to rest players. So you're 100% right. We're gonna have to move out of this all year round. The season that is trying to cope with the Southern Hemisphere season and the Northern Hemisphere season.
Yeah, no, the realignment of the seasons and whatever happens going forward with the rugby championships is up to the administrators, and Rassie and the Springbok management have no sort of say over that, and the rugby department at SA Rugby doesn't have too much say over that. But what they do have say over is when they select their players and for a BOK tour. So it might be if Rassie wants to be proactive, he might be able to say, well, at the end of the year, listen, we might take a hit, but I'm sending a young team. I'm leaving these experienced players at home. They're not going on tour because they're going to go and have. Because I do feel I do have a bit of a sympathy with the franchises in this country as well. I mean, they pay 65% of the BOK salary, and already they don't see that much of them, or not as much as they should. I mean, Regulation 9 goes out of the window in this country. We organise an extra test against Japan. So so I think it's very much up to Rassie and the Springboks to find that resting period, and maybe that would also serve the purpose of bringing in new players that they can have a look at. I mean, obviously some experienced players there. I mean, I mentioned Jake earlier taking that young team in 2006 to England, and I think it was Ireland. It was Ireland and England. That tour, but they did have, if I remember correctly, they had John Smith there still as the captain, and Johan Ackerman, who played for the while, but experienced guys were there. I think they have. I'm not talking about sending it completely out the window and us send us France and Ireland. Obviously, a big believer that every test is important. But just if we are sort of looking ahead and we want to preserve the older players, something has to give at some stage. And I don't know if it can give at franchise level, because those guys are already paying too much for players they don't see enough of.
Yeah. Guys, I think we're going to leave it there. We're going to go straight into a Springbok press conference soon to the team announcement. Nick, thank you for giving us your time again, and enjoy your travels. We're enjoying the tour of the different hotel and guest rooms that you're staying in. So we'll chat again hopefully after this week.
Lovely chatting to you guys.
Thanks, Gav. We'll chat to you guys later.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay. Cheers.